Okay, making a video and such. A number of you have commented on my recent video about Amendum, and Gary himself has recorded a video response. Now, I want to say at the beginning, actually, I like Gary. A lot of people have a hard time getting past the coarse veneer, the rough, coarse bastard that they see on camera, and all of the name-calling and the bitterness and the angst. And I can see the compassion that is at the core of all of this, and I appreciate that. I wish more people had the passion and the compassion that Gary has for suffering. And so, you know, he's a bit rough around the edges, but I actually really like him for that. And I respect that kind of passion for something that he deems to be so seriously important. Now, having said that, Gary, at some point in his video response to me, was upset that I apparently mischaracterized something, and the whole video that he made about me was a gross mischaracterization. For starters, he started right in the middle of a thought. You know, he took a thought out of context, some 8 minutes and 24 seconds or something like that, into a 15-minute video. And then responded to it as though I was saying that I was okay with suffering and that sort of thing, or that you just have to be okay with suffering. And the whole point that I was trying to make was that your argument, your points were inconsistent. You're making moral charges against people who you claim to be robotic end results of mechanical material processes, and I was calling out that inconsistency. And to conflate that somehow, my pointing out the inconsistency with as though I'm trying to refute or I just don't care about suffering, is ridiculous, and I don't want to hear that happening again. Because that's not the case. And in fact, what I find interesting about Gary's response to me was not the mischaracterizations of the things I was saying, but what he chose to respond to. See, Gary, and hi Gary again, Gary is a guy who claims to have figured all of this out since he was like 13 years old or something like that, and that it's not that difficult to figure out that the thing that is of real value here is suffering, that's sort of the baseline, and everything else is sentient life trying to escape suffering, and that we ought to not impose suffering on others, whether it's on animals or whether it's on other human beings, particularly in the thing that we have the most control over, and that is whether or not we bring other human beings into existence at all. And, you know, Gary claims to have this sort of superior computer, I guess you might say, right? Why is everyone else so fucking stupid, and why can't they figure it out? And he doesn't like me using the word moral, by the way. He thinks that's a dogmatic word or something. Just for the record, Gary, I'm an atheist. So when I use the word immoral, I'm really literally referring to it in a literal sense. I'm talking about things that people do intentionally with harm and malice and aforethought against another person that they don't really have a right to do, that causes pain or suffering or something like that. So you can take that as that from now on. The reason I use the word moral is because the word moral has a connotation of intentional. It has a connotation of awareness, which you yourself imply as well. And that's why I'm calling these things moral charges. What I'm saying is, it's one thing in a deterministic worldview to have rationality and to come to a conclusion that a certain action is immoral. But if you're going to make the charge against somebody that they are immoral because they chose that act, you are deeming them to have some sort of free will to have made a choice. You have two choices, choice A and choice B, and you chose the wrong one, you are immoral. Because if they're just reacting to programming, I don't think you can make the moral charge. That's the point that I was making. Not that you're not allowed to. I never once said you're not allowed to. I'm not sending the police, Gary. What I'm saying is it's inconsistent with your deterministic worldview. And I think an internal critique of someone's position is important. I'm helping you sharpen your pencil. Unfortunately, you didn't take it that way. Unfortunately, what happened was, interestingly enough, Gary's superior brain had a choice. You could have chosen to respond to my video using the first part of the video, where I concurred to some degree. I defended your position. I defended the antinatalist position against the mischaracterizations made by the likes of Stefan Molyneux, where I said that it is actually the opposite of a nihilistic position, where I said that your concern was of suffering for sentient life, and I pointed out that all sentient life comes from a baseline of suffering and not bliss, and that suffering is important and it is the utmost value, etc., etc. You could have played all of that and you could have said, see, this guy gets it. But you chose to move on to the part that criticized you and the inconsistency in your argument. I would say it was a vanity play. I think it's pretty clear because you were obviously very upset by it. Now, I'm not claiming to be immune from vanity and you know, those sorts of things myself, but you're the guy who's claiming, A, to have this superior brain, this superior computer to all the other assholes, and B, you claim to have this as your utmost priority. This is the most important thing possible to you, is the mitigation of human and sentient suffering, of all sentient life, all animals, all humans. Why did you let your vanity get in the way then? Why did you succumb to this rather than thinking for a moment, possible ally here? This is someone who could help spread the message. No, you couldn't do it. Your inferior computer couldn't do it. You chose a different option. Now, I could make the moral charge against you and say that was kind of the wrong thing to do and that was immoral. But in your worldview, really, I shouldn't be able to do that. Now, should I? Because you were just succumbing to your base programming. And you need some kind of a talking to. You need to be called an asshole or stupid or something like that. And that's going to help you. We'll get to that later, the efficacy of these methods. So, A, I was not saying you're not allowed to call someone an asshole. I was pointing out it's inconsistent with a deterministic worldview because these people are just operating on their programming. And so you can't get mad at the programmed. You can only be mad at the programmer. In this case, there isn't really a programmer because what we're talking about is mechanical processes. So all you can do is hopefully attempt to change the programming. Now, if you're going to claim that that's what you're trying to do by calling people assholes, we'll talk about that later. What I love, though, Gary, is you gave me an example. Now, you gave me the example of a computer that when you get this computer and you type in P's, it only types J's. And then you gave the computer free will because you said you're going to call the computer stupid and you're going to say it's not behaving within the realm of efficiency and it's supposed to follow a certain script. Well, it is following a fucking script because if the computer is only giving J's instead of P's or whichever way it was, that's what it was fucking programmed to do. Now, wasn't it? But you said the computer said, no, I don't really want to. I feel like this is what suits me better. And you talk about things like rationalization when you talk about people rationalizing why they choose to do the bad thing instead of the good thing with regard to sentient suffering. Well, the computer doesn't have a choice, does it? But you acted like it did. You gave it free will. I think you were too upset by being challenged by somebody to think these things through. I would submit to you, Gary, that yelling at a computer for following its programming and calling it stupid and expecting that to make some kind of difference is the ultimate stupidity. That is futility writ large. I will fix your analogy for you, by the way, because you said if you get this computer and you just type P's and J's and whatever. No. You go and buy a computer and it actually says on the box, this computer was programmed to type a J whenever you strike the letter P key. And then you get it, and then you strike the P key and you get J's, and then you start yelling at the computer, and you call it an asshole, and you expect that some kind of change is going to come about. That's your analog, right? This is your human analog. Don't get mad at me, right? Your human analogs are pens, computers, calculators, and robots. All inanimate objects, all things that only can operate based on the mechanical construction and principles of physics and programming that are within them, right? Those are your human analogs. And then you're talking to this computer as though it's a human and though it's made some sort of an immoral choice. I mean, you also talked about people being malicious, that the people do these things maliciously and they rationalize. Well, I would submit that rationalizing takes part in the aware part of our brain, the conscious part of our brain. And I would also put forth that malice connotes intent. Malice is sort of like, I know what's right, but I'm choosing to do wrong anyway because fuck it. right? Because screw you, because it suits me better than you. That's a free will. You're giving all of this free will. I mean, and if you think I'm wrong, that calling people malicious is giving them free will, or is acting more consistently with a free will worldview, then ask yourself, if you call that computer that's typing J's when you hit the P key, if you call it malicious, is it doing it maliciously? I mean, I think at this point, that is so fucking stupid that if you're honest with yourself, and if you're as smart as you claim to be, that you have to be thinking to yourself, fuck, he's right. No, he's right about that. And I think you got to do some introspection. I mean, that's the problem with big heads like you and Molyneux and a lot of these other people, is they don't take the time to ask themselves if they're not subject to the very same things they accuse other people of. I spend a lot of time in introspection. I'm not calling myself superior or better than anyone. I'm just wise enough, and I've made enough mistakes in my life to recognize that I don't fucking know everything, and that at some point you got to ask yourself, am I barking up the wrong tree here? Am I wrong about this? Do I need to look at this a different way? Do I need to be more honest in my investigation of another person's worldview or argument or whatever? And I do that. I do it a lot. And I don't think you have. And here would be another example of this. I was talking earlier about the efficacy. Somebody else said to me in a comment on my video, we don't argue with people to get them to choose better. We argue with people to get to reprogram their brains to choose better, something along those lines. In other words, a deterministic idea, which is kind of interesting. I thought about this and I thought it's kind of interesting because on this deterministic worldview, if you believe that everybody's operating on a base programming that they, and I talk fast because I got to make this within 15 minutes, sorry, that if everybody's operating on this deterministic worldview, that nobody has free will, but we actually have free will on other people's behalf because we can try to give them information and browbeat them or whatever enough to reprogram their brains so they'll make a different choice. That's kind of interesting. But getting back to this efficacy thing, my question to that, we argue with people to reprogram their minds is, how's that fucking working for you? If you're as smart as you claim to be, and I would suggest that the recognition of our own suffering and then empathy for others, et cetera, is not base level. It's somewhat above. It may not be the highest intellect that's required for that, but it's above sort of monkey brain stuff or whatever. Very few animals exhibit empathy to that degree. And certainly no animals exhibit empathy to the degree that, say, Gary would be promoting. But Gary, your stupidity is actually just grounded at the base cognition level, right? Like doing the same thing over and over and not getting any decent results. How has this calling everybody assholes fucking worked for you? I mean, you are an obscure, tiny cult following little nobody nothing on the internet. You are the functional equivalent of some guy with like an end is near sign flailing around, yelling at a tour bus as it goes by. And everybody in the tour bus is like, look at the crazy man. And then when the tour bus goes on and everybody's attention is piqued by something else, you are a fucking distant memory. That is a fucking, if that's not an example of stupidity, I don't know what is. At some point, maybe you would look at something like a video where I made and say, I wonder if this guy could be an ally. Or maybe even you just look at what you're doing and at some point you go, fuck, I'm not really gaining any traction here. This isn't working. I'm not gaining enough traction to make any kind of a difference at all and to change your tactics, right? Again, the defense of calling people assholes is that you got to jar people. And again, I'm just asking you, what fucking difference have you made? You're not going to cause antinatalism to take root in your lifetime, or probably almost ever. You're probably not going to stop people from eating meat. So, at some point, do you not restructure your approach? Do you not recognize that what you're doing is fucking stupid? And again, that's not really my criticism here. My criticism is actually that your worldview is not consistent internally. And that turns off some people, not to mention the flailing around and the yelling and screaming at people. I'm going to cut this video off here. It looks like I'm going to have to make a part 2. Stay tuned for that.